virtual coffee, the Career Chats with Emily. So do be aware you're being recorded. We say it every week. Don't do anything you wouldn't want your mama or your babies to see. I'm Dr. Waldner. You've already met Dr. Velarde, and we have a very special guest here today, and that's Emily Reese. And Emily loves Troy so much, and she believes in Troy so much that she actually has 2 degrees from Troy. That's Trojan blood running through her veins, if you've ever seen it. She has a bachelor's in communication arts and a master's in student affairs counseling. And Emily's actually served as a career counselor at Troy University for 6 years. And she's really passionate about helping students explore their career interests through professional development and networking opportunities. Emily has been saving up her best career tips to share with you today. So I'm super excited to have her here. She's going to tell you about those career trips and walk you through to make sure everybody leaves with something they didn't know before. And then we're going to open it up so you can ask Emily anything about career services or about your dream job and what you want to find. Again, please stay muted if you aren't already muted. And I'm going to turn it over to Emily. Emily, welcome and take it away. You are muted, my friend. I'm so sorry. You will have to unmute yourself.
I was trying to follow the rules. So thank you. That was such a sweet introduction. I hope I can live up to all of those great compliments that I was just given. So what I'm going to do is I really would like for this to be interactive. That's kind of the style that I roll with. And so you can unmute yourself and interrupt me. You can type in the chat box. I want to be able to help you guys kind of explore whatever you need to about careers. So I put together a PowerPoint that I'll go ahead and start sharing. And so these are just some of my thoughts on what I think would be good for you to know. And then obviously, if you have questions, let me know. So we'll go ahead and get started. So I want to talk to you guys today about finding or landing your dream job. And so we had a little bit of fun at the beginning where we were talking about what those jobs may be. Some of you guys, you know, like I think we heard RN, and so you're probably in nursing school right now, so that would make sense. Some of our dream jobs are a little more fun. And so, you know, just kind of think about what your dream job is. What are you excited about? Is it something that you're working towards right now, or is it maybe a retirement job that you're looking towards in the future, or is it something fun like me where I said I would want to own a doggy daycare? So we're going to walk through a couple different steps just to help you think about that and explore some of your options. So really the whole focus on this and what I'm going to walk you through is our career development cycle. I don't want to make it boring for you, but I just wanted you to be able to see the visualization, the 4 steps that we'll kind of look at. So obviously you'll see this is the cycle, which means you may repeat through the cycle multiple times throughout your life. So some of you guys might be joining us today at the first step of the cycle, or you may be in step 2 or 3, and some of you guys might be in that reassessment piece where maybe you've had a career for a while and now you are looking to transition to something else. So we're going to kind of meet everybody where they are and give you some tips and tricks for whatever stage you're in. So the first step, and what I think is so important, is the career decision-making process. And so this is a lot of what I do as a career counselor. It is what I'm passionate about. It's helping students figure out how well do I know myself. I don't think you can even start to think about what your dream job would be if you don't know anything about yourself. And so the 4 key components that we want to focus on are what we call your VIPs or your VIPs. And so that's your values, your interests, your personality, and your skills. And so when you're thinking about values, yes, we all have personal values, and those are going to be really important as far as what career path you may be interested in. But each company is going to have its own culture and own values, and you want to think about how do your personal values fit into the values of that company. And also, what are your career values? What are you looking for at a job? So that way you're not applying for positions or companies that aren't going to fit with who you are at the core. The next thing we kind of want to talk about are interests. And so really we're talking more about work interests, and I'll go into that in just a second. But what do you enjoy doing? And that's going to be different for every person. So maybe you love working with people, or maybe you're more computer focused. Maybe you want to work outdoors, or maybe you want to sit at a desk all day. Everyone has their own preference, but again, we want to tailor what our major is and what careers we're looking at based on our interests. So that way we'll end up being happy and satisfied in our job. And then I'm sure you've probably taken a personality assessment before, but there's various different ones you can take. But you want to think about how is who you are as a person, your personality, how does that fit into the career fields that you're interested in? So if you're an introvert, what does that look like for you, and what are you looking for in a career? If you're really extroverted, making sure that you're fulfilling that need in your day-to-day job. And then finally, sometimes the tricky part is we have to think about our skills. So what are we good at? In my classes, I use a lot of examples. Like it might be cool if I were a famous singer. Like, wouldn't that be fun? Or, if I could play in a band. But if I don't have that skill set, then that may not work out that well for me. Not to say that you can't work on your skills and that you can't, kind of harness and hone those. But deep down, we kind of know what we're good at. So thinking about what are realistic things you can work around and build up, and then what are your limitations along with your skills. So before we kind of keep going, I just wanted to give you a brief overview of some of the assessments that we would typically use in our office, or just common assessments. So now would be a time where if you did want to unmute yourself or put in the chat box, I'm just curious how many of you have ever taken a career assessment, a personality assessment, or anything like that. So I'm going to, I think I stopped sharing my screen just for a second because I want to know kind of what assessments have y'all taken. If you want to put any of that in the chat box. I know some popular ones would be like the Myers-Briggs personality assessment, the MBTI, where you're one of 16 different types. Maybe you've taken one that categorized you as a color or an animal, or you've looked at shapes and they've told you something about your personality. So really any of these can be useful for you. Okay, so we've got Dr. Todd says he's certified to administer the MBTI. And actually, I have never heard of the Thomas Kilmann instrument. Is that a personality or an interest assessment? And then Jay says he wished he'd taken one before and during college. He did everything afterwards. Okay, conflict preference. I bet that's really interesting. So yeah, I think I took some, mostly when I was in college. I was fortunate during my communication classes. We took a few in a conflict management class that I took, and some interpersonal communication classes. So that kind of got me started, and what really got me interested and kind of led me down path to career counselor in general. So think about those while you're in school, but then also keep taking those as you change and evolve and you land in your career, just to make sure that you're still compatible with what you're thinking, right? Because as you experience life, as things happen, as we encounter world pandemics, right, we may change a little bit. So we might need to reevaluate what's important to us. A lot of us were saying, hey, I really like working from home, and this is something that could be cool. So then maybe that would be something that you would want to reassess, right? Am I in a field that really fits me, or is there something else I could look at doing? I don't necessarily believe that there's one dream job out there and that's like your one like soulmate in a job. I think oftentimes we're going to have several different jobs and careers throughout our life. And so you just want to be aware of that and keep evolving, so that way you're not stuck in something that you really don't like and that you're miserable waking up and going to every single day. Let's see, some compliments. Yes, okay, so personality assessments. Somebody said they took one prior to enrolling at Troy. So I have a resource for you that I think will pop out at the end of this, and it's going to give you a link to 3 different assessments you can look at if you've never taken one before. But I would really encourage you to do that and take several different ones. Take some that focus on your personality, but then look at work interests and maybe do a check on your values, just so that way you can use all of those to become more well-rounded when you're thinking about the approach you want to take to your career. Let me pop back over to the PowerPoint. So Focus 2 is one that we actually offer through our office. Now, I would say this is more of a basic career assessment. I think a lot of you guys, from what I was seeing, could be in your master's program or towards the end of your time here with us at Troy. So it may not be as beneficial, but this one has separate assessments for your values, your interests, your personality, and your skills. So if you want a quick assessment to kind of cover all of that, then I would definitely look at focus 2. Another really popular one, I don't think I saw any of that in the chat box, but is the Holland code. You might have heard the Reassessment code or the self-directed search. I actually have a link for that one on the document that I'll get out to you. This one is really good because it breaks down your work interest into 6 different types. And so it'll really help you figure out what you're more interested in. Is it working with people, with your hands, with machines, or with technology? And so you can really utilize that to think about how do all of my interests fit into my career? And just because, you like working with people doesn't mean you have to be a teacher, right? There's several other options that you could choose from. So you want to piece together all of your interests to come up with that dream career that's perfect for you. We've talked about the MBTI. One that I've recently gotten into is the Enneagram. I'm not certified. I'm still learning about that one, but I think it's really interesting. And I think as we become older adults, things like the MBTI, the Enneagram, and some of these other assessments can be useful because we can see how they play out in a variety of things, not just our career, but in our family life, in our personal life, in our work relationships. And so I think that can be helpful to help you understand as a person, what do I need? How do I function best? And how can I convey that to other people? So don't think of career assessments as just something that you take once to help you choose a major. That's really not quite what they're for. They're to help you understand yourself and others better. So that way we can all work together to build a good work environment. So I'm gonna, do we have a question? Yeah, I don't think so. So we'll kind of move along. So the first part is self-exploration, and then the second part of this career decision-making is career exploration. And so we need to think about how well do I know my options? So especially for the typical freshman that I might work with, it's hard to know, one, every major that Troy even offers, but two, every career that's even out there, right? That's pretty impossible. Usually we stick to what we know. We think about what did our parents do, and usually you'll either want to do exactly that or want to get very far away from what they did. You'll think about what have you seen on TV, what did you find interesting, and what was maybe a job that a family friend had. But oftentimes we don't know everything that's out there. So we really want to encourage you guys to do some research and to explore, to kind of broaden your horizon, use those assessments to start researching. So also in the document that we'll push out, I've got a couple resources as far as where you can go for research. And I'm actually going to show you guys that in just a few minutes, but I want to talk through the rest of the things on this slide first. So research is really important, and then some of this falls under that. So you might want to shadow someone in the field you think you want to go into. I see this a lot with students. I'll say, well, why don't you go job shadow somebody for a day or for a week or as long as you can, just to make sure that you really do want to be a physical therapist or you really do want to be an attorney. Because sometimes I think we fantasize these things as we're thinking about our dreams, and we don't truly know what goes on day to day. So you really want to take that into consideration as well. So informational interviews are also helpful because basically that flips the switch on interviewing. So instead of you going in somewhere and them asking you a bunch of questions about yourself, you're flipping that and you get to ask the employer questions about themselves and their career and their job path. So I think this is really important for students because you get to kind of find out some of the dirty details, I guess I would say, on that career. So maybe it's not, as glamorous as we think it is, what's real life, how much paperwork is involved, what are some of the things that you find hard about your job. But then on the flip side, what do you really love about your job? And what would you say to someone who's thinking about entering that career field? So job shadowing and informational interviews kind of could go hand in hand, but it'll help you gain that real life experience. And then there's always clubs and organizations that you can join. So whether you're a Troy campus student, where typically you would be able to meet and interact with those clubs and organizations, or if it's something in your community or just a professional association where you pay a small fee and then you get to be a member of an online community where they're going to have resources and webinars and workshops for you to attend. So think about any of those small ways that you can get involved and still keep researching and learning about the field that you're interested in. And then, of course, we have the general education classes. So you might take a class in psychology or music or history or whatever you think you may be interested in, just to double check that interest. I can't see the chat box, but my watch is vibrating. So do we have anything that I need to acknowledge in the chat box? Good.
Nope, good to go.
Okay, all right. So these are some of the tools that I want us to look at. So these are my 3 favorite, I guess, websites or resources as far as searching for your career. So if we'll pop this up, let's see, let me exit my screen. I already have it pulled up for us. So the first one is Career Coach. And so this is neat because it's kind of branded and tied to Troy University and the majors that we offer, but it has a lot of research and data on the back end for you guys to use. So you will get a link to this. You don't have to worry about writing the link down, but it's called Career Coach. And there's several different things you can do on this website. So the first would be take a career assessment. Again, that's what I've been talking about. This one has one that's based on that Holland code. So it will give you those 6 different interest types. So you can take that assessment. There's a short version and a long version. But if you've never taken an assessment before, I would say start with this one, and that would be helpful. And then you can also come here to browse careers or browse programs that Troy University offers. So is there a career that anybody wants to throw out at me? Either unmute yourself or put in the chat box and someone can call that out. And if not, I can make one up. Any careers that you're interested in? Anybody?
Wow, they're going easy on you. Chad says he is interested in being a software engineer.
Okay. So let's try that. And so we have 21 results that may relate to that. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to do the first one or even the second one's of interest, but what you would do, Chad, is just kind of scroll through. You can get a quick overview of salary and education level required, and then just choose one that you think would be most interesting. So I'm just going to go with system software. I'm not a computer person, so I'm not quite sure, but we'll pretend like that would be what you were interested in. So you can click on that and again, get a pretty good overview of what would be required. So obviously some sort of computer science or information systems as far as your major goes. And you can read more about the career field, including daily tasks that would be required, education level. So this could be really important, especially as you're exploring careers, because sometimes we choose something and we're not aware that we actually need a master's degree or doctoral degree to do what we want. And so I encourage you to go ahead and research early on so that way you're aware of what level of education will you need. Same thing for skills. So you can look at that and go, okay, I think I have those, or okay, wow, I should take a class or work on developing that skill. One thing that's always talked about whenever I have a career counseling conversation is salary or wages, because you guys are in school to have a career, to make money, to support yourself and maybe your family. So we want to think about that. But we also want to be aware that sometimes what they say, you know, is the median salary, right? That's in the middle of everything. So think about what will you start off making, and then hopefully look at this as potential growth. And depending on where you live and cost of living and all of that, what could your potential salary range be at some point in your career? So I think that's a good start. This website will also show you some employment trends and different companies that are actually hiring or have positions posted. So this one kind of does it all in one for you. So I would definitely recommend looking at Career Coach. And then I'm quickly going to pop over 2 other tabs, but I also have these resources on a handout for you. So this one's called Own It, and it operates very, very much the same. You would just type in a career here. I don't know if there's anybody else. I'll do kind of like my standard criminal justice that I normally go with, but if you have something else, feel free to let me know. And so you can look at what would some of the careers be with a potential criminal justice degree. Same thing. So you would click on it and it's going to give you all of those different job duties, tasks, skills, wage, and employment trends. So you can use any of these websites or resources that you like. There also is Occupational Outlook Handbook. I'm not going to bore you with all the details about everything because you can kind of look into this yourself, but basically just know that there are several resources out there for you designed to help you research and explore career options. So make sure that you've done that for whatever your major is and whatever career field you think you're going into, and you can choose between those 3 different resources, whichever one you like better, whatever aesthetic you like, or what information it's giving you. They all should be pretty similar in what they're presenting you. So I'm going to click back on my PowerPoint now. So hopefully that kind of gave you a good overview of that. Again, you'll get all of these links in the document for you, so that way you can save and continue to use and research. So we'll kind of continue on. The next part of the cycle would be career planning and preparation. And so typically I would say that this would go sophomore through senior year, but again, depending on where you're at and if you're in that reassessment process, it would just be the next step. And so this one is all about thinking about how to start reaching out to employers and how to start building some of that experience that you need. So it's really important not only to have academic studies, but also to have some kind of work experience or volunteer experience. And it's even better if that could be related to the career that you think you may want to go into. So I've got 4 different ways that you can do that on the screen here. Internships, probably the #1 way. Some majors require this, so that way you really are required to get that hands-on experience. But if it's not required in your career field, I would highly encourage it, whether that's for a summer or it's a part-time internship that you can get. And then if that can't happen, maybe look at part-time employment. I know a lot of you guys have mentioned working. And so if you can work in a field that is semi-related to your career, that would be obviously best case scenario. But if you can't, any type of work experience is just going to be critical in building those skills and letting you interact with people and learn how to manage and handle conflict. So that way you can translate that into the career that you'd like to go into. And then volunteer work or extracurricular activities, really important, if you don't have the time or if you already have a full-time job and so you just want to volunteer in the field that you're interested in, or work with people to kind of do something that you would also like to do at some point. So think about any time you can have an experience to really see what it's like in that career field, whether that's paid or unpaid, short-term or long-term. Anything that you can do to add to your resume is going to be really important. And then also thinking about your job search skills and how can you tell us about your education and your experience in a way that's going to catch employers' attention, so that way you can land that interview and eventually your dream job. So the second part of what I do as a career counselor is help students with professional development. And so that's a big variety of things. Usually we start with a resume or a cover letter. I will not go into all the details of that on this webinar, but we have it on our website for you to reference, and we would be glad to help you review your resume and kind of get that up to par, so that way you're ready to apply for some of these positions. Interviewing and dressing professionally is going to be super important and something that you want to go ahead and start practicing and working on now. So that way, when you have an opportunity to interview for your dream job, you're kind of already aware of what some of the trends are and what's to be expected in that interview experience. And then the big piece I want to touch on is networking. So I think when we hear that, I think we have a couple computer people on here, so you might think of a whole different way of networking. But I'm talking about interacting with people. And so I think we hear that term and it can sound so intimidating, but it doesn't have to be. It's not as fancy as you think it is. So basically what I would encourage you to do first is start with who you know. So that doesn't mean, that your mom's best friend is in the career field that you're interested in, but she might know somebody who is, or have a connection that she could pass along for you. So who do you know? Who do you encounter on a regular basis, whether it's family, friends, distant relatives, a coworker that someone from a church activity or community activity that you're in. Start with those people, kind of put some feelers out, let them know what you're interested in and see if they have any contacts. That would be step number 1. And then after that, you kind of have to start reaching out to people that you want to know. So I always say, who do you want to make yourself known to, right? Who would you like to know? And then just start networking. So a good place to do that, and what we try to help with in career services, are career fairs and networking events. Obviously, in the COVID world that we are living in right now, that's going to look a little bit different, but we are trying really hard to offer you virtual services. Obviously, right now we're having virtual coffee and hanging out and talking. So we're going to do that with employers and hold career fairs virtually for you, just so that way you can continue to network. That's going to be really important. And I think what's interesting is a lot of companies are actually open to that now, because people are working from home and life just looks a lot different. So we're being a lot more innovative in what we're doing to reaching out to students and potential employees in that regard. And two big pieces that people often overlook would be using LinkedIn or social media. So if you're not familiar with LinkedIn, I would encourage you to look into that. It is basically like social media for networking. So you can upload your resume, and you put a headshot on your profile, and you give a short bio, and you tell people what you're looking for and what you're interested in. And you'd be surprised with how many students actually report back to us that they've had job opportunities come from LinkedIn, where there's hiring recruiters actively searching profiles and reaching out to offer positions and jobs to people. So don't underestimate that resource, especially in a time where we are mostly virtual. And the other piece is social media. So many companies have social media presences in various different platforms. And then so many people or influencers are on social media. So I would say just don't be afraid to send that message, right? The worst that would happen is you get a no or you don't get a response. And then the best that could happen is that you actually get to have a meaningful conversation with someone in a career field that you're interested in. So social media and virtual communication are definitely changing the way that we network. And so I want you guys to go ahead and be on top of that trend and know how to use some of those virtual resources to help you accelerate your networking process. Any questions so far? Okay, so we'll keep going. We've got two different parts left, and then I will open it up for some questions. So be thinking of anything that you'd like to kind of ask about, so that way we can chat about that at the end. So third step, kind of the exciting part, you're at graduation. It's time to think about actually getting that job and what does it look like. So I've talked about this throughout this presentation, but I really want you to strive to have your professional employment. So hopefully the job that you gain after graduation, we want that to be congruent with your VIPs, with your values, your interests, your personality, and your skills. So that way your career plans and goals are kind of all in a line. That way you're satisfied when you wake up, which makes you a more productive employee, which makes your employer happy as well. So don't be afraid to reach out to us in career services, but also your advisors and your professors. Oftentimes they're the more boots on the ground people. They might have worked in that career field. They're going to have connections with other colleagues and coworkers. So don't be afraid to reach out and ask them for advice or opinions, or even some connections that they could pass along. Other things we're thinking about is that your compensation level and your room for advancement are usually determined by your experience in your field. So sometimes we'll start out in an entry-level position with the hopes of rising within that career field, whether that means you need to go back and get a second or a third degree and then therefore start that career cycle all over again, or if it just means that you need to put in your 5 years of experience and then you'll be eligible for those advancement opportunities. So again, like I mentioned, in career services, we want to help you think about, how do I become employed? How do I research jobs once I know what career field I'm looking at? So we are going to have a virtual career fair on September 30th. So go ahead and mark that down. You will be getting emails with details about what that will look like and how that will run. But that's going to be open for all Troy University students. So no matter where you are, what location or campus you're in, you will be eligible to attend our virtual career fair, which will be the first one we've ever done, but really needed and useful in the time that we're living in. And then we also have Handshake, and I know we have done several virtual coffees about this in the past, so I'm not going to go into a big detail on that, but there's the link for that. You'll have that later, and it's a place where you can search for jobs and internships. So if that's you, if you're in stage 3 of this cycle, make sure you jot down Handshake and check out our website for that. All right, last part is reassessment. So this was interesting to me, I guess, whenever I was a student, thinking about, oh, okay, once I get my first job or career, that doesn't mean that I'm going to stay there forever. I know some of the older generations are like my dad, maybe your parents or your grandparents, they kind of had one job, and my dad's been at that job for 30 years. And that's not always the case for us, especially in the newer generations that are coming up. We're going to have multiple different careers, which means we'll have several different jobs. So just being aware of that. And like I mentioned at the beginning, if for some reason you find yourself unhappy in your job, you might need to do a little reassessment and start that whole process all over again. So just be constantly thinking about your values, your interests, your personality, and your skills. Are they staying the same? Are they evolving? Has a life circumstance, made something else more valuable for you at this time? And so what does that look like for you? So keep that process going. Keep working on your skills. Keep thinking about your experience. So that way you can end up in your dream job and then have a happy career in that field. So I will take questions now. If you guys have any, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and pop back in with y'all. Are there any questions or thoughts on any of that? Okay, someone said, or Jay said he joined LinkedIn. Yes, that's good. Should you explore short-term career or long-term career first? I think you could do both. I would start with long-term just because sometimes that will break down short-term careers for you and kind of give you some feedback and some advice on that. So kind of thinking about, okay, wow, what education do I need for my long-term goal? And then how can I go about getting some of that skills and experience that I need? So I would say both, but maybe start with the bigger picture if you can. Okay, so Lauren, she's my boss, and she's exactly right. She says it's helpful as a leader to take assessments so you know how to best lead your team and put people in the right positions. And that's something that I've been working with her on too, especially for our student workers in the office. So thinking about that, right, is you want to put people and help them excel. So thinking about their strengths. So if you guys ever find yourself in leadership positions, assessments can be a really useful tool to help you figure out where do you fit amongst that team. Even as you're applying for jobs, you may find that companies have you take some sort of assessment just because they want to know, how do you think and where would you fit in our team? They might be looking for someone, who kind of falls in that certain category or role. And that's a good way without just saying, tell me, Chad, what would you do in this situation? They can kind of look at your personality and understand how you may interact in some of those situations. Anybody else? Questions, thoughts?
Lauren, I had a question forwarded to me by a student, and they're saying, when should I start thinking about my job search, and at what point do I start this career exploration stuff? Like if they're a brand new student.
Yeah. So, and Lauren, you can definitely hop in. Donna, I think you're on here too. Anybody, but we encourage you to start like day one. And I know that sounds a little crazy and it can be very overwhelming, and that may change. So I'll just give you an example. I came in as a nursing student. I was dead set that was my calling. I wanted to help people, and that was just what I was going to do. And then I took a few classes and I realized I don't really like science, and there are multiple other ways to help people. And so I kind of ended up in the counseling in the teaching field, which really fits my skill sets a lot better than being a nurse. So I would say take it early, but also reassess often. Go ahead and get started as a freshman or as a new student, so that way you can try to align on the path, but also be aware that reassessment is necessary, and it can happen even while you're still in school to try to figure that out. But what we don't want to happen is hopefully you're not a senior going, oh my goodness, I'm in the complete wrong major and career field. So earlier the better for sure. Oh, thank you, Erica. I'm glad to see you on here again. Yes, alums can participate and use these services. I'm trying to think. Yes, all most of those are just open-ended on a website that's not necessarily sponsored by Troy. So you would be able to log in and use those. I think we've talked about Handshake before. That one you could sign up as a Troy alum to use as well. And then I'm sure Lauren can definitely tell us, but the virtual career fair would be available for our alums as well.
Yes, for sure. We'd love that.
Okay. Dr. Waldner said, is everyone here familiar with Handshake? I guess, yeah, we do have several new faces. I wasn't sure. Do y'all know what I mean when I say that? Some of you say yes. Okay. I can put that.
Let's ask it a different one. Has anybody not seen Handshake before? Alan's also asking in the meantime while we have people chatting to that, how do you get a reference? It's a good question, Alan.
Okay, Alan, do you mean a reference for like an application when an employer says, give a reference? I think that would be what you're talking about. So kind of my tips for that are, you want to choose someone who can speak to you academically and or professionally. Okay, yes. So for a graduate assistant or a software engineer, someone that can speak about your academic or your professional skills and experience. So that's different than when we're thinking about like a personal reference, or when you're applying for some of those jobs we were talking about at the beginning where you're working at McDonald's and Taco Bell and they say, who's a reference? And you give like your best friend's mom or something. Right now we're thinking about professional references. So I always say start with your professors, right? But that's going to also require that you start connecting with them early on. It doesn't mean that you're a senior and you go back and you say, hey, I took your class as a sophomore and I think I'm just going to write your name down. We want to think about who do you have a relationship with in your department, or who's a boss, a boss that that could speak to your work ethic and what you've done, or maybe someone who's in charge of an organization that you've been in. So those would be my top recommendations on that. One thing that I will say, and I would really encourage you to do this, is please ask somebody if they're willing to be a reference for you. And that can be hard, and you might get a no every once in a while, and that could be, heartbreaking and crushing, but I would rather get a no to my face than get something bad sent in as a reference, right? Where they're like, no, I would not hire Emily. She did this or she did that. I would rather hear, oh, I don't feel comfortable recommending you, or I don't know enough about you to do that. So kind of keep that in mind, especially if you're using someone or a professor from a few semesters ago or a few terms ago. It's good just to reach back out and say, hey, I'm applying for blank job. Here's my resume. I would like to know if you could serve as a reference for me. And that way it kind of helps remind the person who you are, how they know you, and they have your resume to kind of craft that letter off of. Hopefully that gave you some good tips there. Someone says they don't know about Handshake, so I can definitely show you guys that in just a second. And then Ashley says, is it important to have a cover letter? I would say if it's optional, obviously it's not required, but I think anytime you can have more tools to explain yourself and your experience, the better. So I would definitely say have one. The trick is we want to make sure that it's written professionally and is conveying exactly what you want it to convey. So yes, we have tips on our website for how to do that. We break it down paragraph by paragraph of what you should say and what kind of things to include. So I think that's good. Will everybody always look at it if it's optional? Maybe not, but if they're looking at your resume and debating between, 2 or 3 potential candidates, whatever you write in that cover letter could really help them be persuaded to choose you. Yes, that is very right. Please stay in touch with your professors if you want to ask them for a reference. I wouldn't necessarily, choose someone from freshman year that you just liked. Hopefully it's someone in your major that you've been working with. I had a student ask me, actually, I didn't even get asked. I just got an email that said, so-and-so, wants you to be a reference, fill out this form. And it just took me a little while to remember back who that student was, how I knew her, what class I taught her in. So just making that extra effort to reach out and let somebody be aware that you would like to use them is really important.
You mentioned a
I'm
resume also a second ago, and I would just encourage students when you ask for a reference, please include that, just because that does two things. One, it jogs our memory a little bit, but it also means where we can speak to some things that we may have forgotten or may not be as aware of what you've been involved with. And not to mention that we may have known that you were involved in several activities, but we may not recall what the name of those things were. So that resume really helps. Or in Chad's case, if you remind me that the word cheesecake, just all of a sudden, I mean, my memory got flooded back immediately, and I remembered everything. I just needed a little key word to do that. And so anything you can do to help your professors, help us write those letters is huge.
Yes, and I think that's helpful, and especially because if I'm writing a letter for a student, I really want to try to touch on, them personally. So I want to know, what have you been involved in? Do you have leadership positions? Kind of, what are your interests? And I can gain that from your resume and the activities that you've been involved in. So I think definitely include that. It just, I think, makes your reference feel more comfortable saying yes, because they have a little bit of something to kind of use as background. Let's see. Someone said, I'm a senior and this is all new. Where do I start? Yeah, it can seem overwhelming. But don't let it overwhelm you. I would say start with an assessment, just because those are more fun, right? And so that way you're kind of easing into it. You're learning a little bit about yourself, and that way you can utilize that and translate and use some of those things in a job interview, right? Because you'll know what your interests are. You might know what your personality is and how you would handle certain situations. So start there. And then start with the research. So I'm not sure if you kind of already know what path you want to head in as far as their career. You may know career path and maybe not job title, and that's okay. I don't always want you to know job title. We want to think about path and what that looks like. So start with some of that research, and then as soon as you can, start trying to network, whether that's in person with people that or now that we're doing a lot of things virtual, what that would look like for you. And we have advice for searching in the jobs in the age of COVID. So I think for a while, everyone kind of took a pause and was like, what are we going to do? But now that we're kind of looking at a new reality, that this probably going to be around for a while. Things aren't just going to pop back like we kind of initially hoped they were. I think you'll start to see employers adjusting as well. And actually, if we want to look on the bright side of things, I think this could be really positive in some ways, because what it's doing is it's allowing employers to reach a broader audience. So employers are hosting sessions or putting things out on their websites where they're not saying, hey, we're looking at this top tiered school or this specific program. They're kind of opening up and saying, hey, if you're willing to do the work and research and, come hang out with us in our virtual session, let's go ahead and do that. So I would say keep your eyes open. Utilize a lot of the free resources that are out, whether it's something through Troy that we're offering, like a virtual coffee. I think you'll see some professors and advisors holding some of these things throughout the upcoming year, just because this is going to be the way that we're going to interact for a while. And a lot of those professional organizations that I mentioned at the beginning are also hosting free workshops and webinars. And so hop on those and learn, and then you'll also have a way to chat and network with people in the fields that you're interested in. Hopefully that's a pretty good overview. I'm seeing if I'm missing any questions.
Kelsey actually had a, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, online students. And Leora, I may need you to kind of help me out on that a little bit.
I was going to go like, yes,
yeah, please go for it.
Okay, I'll start. Then you backfill me, Emily. We'll tag team. So Kelsey asked, do we have any great tips for online students? We have several here today to try to establish those kinds of robust relationships with their online professors. Kelsey, yes, we do. And you're in it right now. So if you're not already on Teams and trying to intentionally make a connection with your professor, that's the place to start, right? I have students in the class all the time that say, hey, can I just grab you for 15 minutes to ask some career related questions? And they set up a meeting like this. So I see them and I hear what's really of interest to them. They're a face to me. They become somebody I know and I care about, not just maybe a number in my class nobody's ever just a number in my class, but I really get to know them individually. So it's a little scary sometimes, Kelsey, but take a minute to reach out to the professors that you like. Don't bother with the ones that you don't have any synergy with, and say, hey, Dr. So-and-so, can I have Dr. Brooks? Can I just have 15 minutes to kind of get your thoughts about my career path and any professional associations? We start drooling when students ask us what professional associations and academic conferences they should go to. We'll be like, of course we'll talk to you about that. And then I remember you, right? Save your work sample, your A+ sample, where I said, wow, Kelsey, that is probably the most insightful thing any student has ever written. I know Erica's gotten some feedback like that. Save that. So when Eric comes back in a year and says, Dr. Weldner, are you going to write my letter? I'll say, well, why should I? And she could say, here's what you said about my most insightful thing ever. So save the sample, make an impression. How about staying in touch a couple months after you graduate and say, hey, Dr. Weldner, just want to let you know I got that job, and hey, I'm so glad you taught us X. It really came in handy. So keep, almost like any relationship you have, right? Like with a mentor, you're going to seed that relationship and keep feeding that. Don't do it with every professor, but maybe just pick a couple of them. Robert, Dr. Velarde, jump in. What do you have any thoughts on that too? And we'll kick it back to Emily.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, just anything that if you have a professor that you have a similar interest in, I mean, anything that you can do to kind of, like you said, when a student comes to me and says something about a professional organization or something, you know, specific, like there's a technology or a math or something that they're interested in. I mean, and Chad knows this. I keep on doting on Chad just because he's been in my class. I mean, if there's something that we really just kind of click on, and it's not just cheesecake, it might be something, you know, I don't know, philosophical or metaphysical or anything like that. Something that, you know, we kind of had a second where we, you know, you have those moments that are outside of class and you build those relationships, you know, and then the professor will remember you. And then you take that moment where, you know, you take those moments and you grow that relationship as a professional, or, you know, a professional relationship. And then when you go for a reference, not only can they speak to you, they can speak to your interests, things that light you up, things that, you know, it's a much more robust letter, and they'll have a lot more fun writing it. I mean, when I write letters for students that I know personally, it gets me excited because I'm excited to see them move on to that next phase of their life. So I know that we had this, and I'm gonna use Erica as an example too. We had a virtual coffee about a month ago, and it was one of those lull times between coffees, and Erica got to go into what she really is passionate about, and so now if I was speaking about, you know, what Erica really likes, I mean, I have a much bigger frame of reference, and we look for her every week because she comes to virtual coffees every week, so we know she's going to be here, and so we get excited about seeing her face, even you know, even if she's just here in the background, we know she's here, and it's important to us. So when, you know, if we had a moment where, you know, she asked us for a reference, of course we'd give her a reference, you know. So anyway, that's that fostering and building of relationships, like Dr. Waldner said, any relationship that you have requires that kind of thing, and it's the same with your professional ones.
Yes, and yeah, those are, I mean, that's probably the best advice. I don't think I have much to follow up with, but just be really intentional with your interaction. So I taught an online orientation class this past term, and so, you know, that's like entry level into the university and what that's like. But the students who really thought about their discussion board posts and wrote those out and interacted with me or sent an email and said, you know, hey, I have a question about this, or just, you know, thanks for having me in class today, or whatever it was. You have to reach out a little bit yourself and kind of put yourself out there, but be intentional with those connections, because it is online and you may not can see that person face to face, but your professors might be open now to Teams meetings and those kind of things and advising appointments. So it doesn't hurt to try to see if that's something they could do and start forming those relationships, ask questions, be interactive whenever you're having class and they say, does anyone have questions? You know, think of a thoughtful, thought-provoking question and ask it, just so that way they'll see your name pop up and they can start, you know, to really get to know you a little bit more virtually. Okay, let's see. I'm kind of moving along. Is the assessment ever wrong? Yeah, well, I don't know if I want to say wrong. I don't know. That's kind of tricky, but I think I wouldn't use it as the basis for everything. Sometimes the way we answer, or the mood that we're in the moment, or whatever stressors are going on in our lives, can influence that, right? Or maybe it's the way the questions are listed, or if you're like me, you've taken so many, I can kind of manipulate it to say whatever I want it to say because I know where it's going. And so that can be hard too. So I would say take several assessments, different kinds, so that way you can see if something will start to line up for you. But yes, in my classes, I have found that sometimes it's just not what the student thinks. So one of two things can happen. One is maybe you haven't accepted the truth. I guess I don't know how to say that politely, but it might really be telling you something and you just haven't accepted that yet. Or sometimes it's just not lining up with exactly what you're thinking about. And if you could talk to someone, me as a career counselor, one of your professors or advisors, to really work through, here's what the assessment's saying, but here's what I think I want to do. Normally we can find that middle ground through a conversation. We can help pull out something that you haven't thought of, or say, okay, I see where all of that's coming, but look at this career. It actually does involve everything that this assessment says. It just shines a different light on it, if that kind of helps. So yes and no. It just kind of
I'd dovetail on that just a hair and say, as you do those, be honest with yourself. Be as honest with yourself as you can be. I mean, sometimes when you're looking at those, it's not the way you view yourself, but it's the way you would like to view yourself. So if it's like, hey, I'm always on time for things, and you're always late, but you would really like to be the person that's always on time, don't say that you're always going to want to be on time, because that's not who you really are. Be honest, and then as you're taking them, there'll be a much more valid tool. Not your rose-colored self, but your actual self.
Yes, I mean, yeah, I agree. And sometimes that's hard. We want to answer with what we think we're supposed to be saying. I don't know if Dr. Todd is still on here or not, but he might have something interesting to add. If he's not still on, you could always reach out to him via Teams too and kind of ask if that's something that you're really stuck on or struggling with, just because he probably has a lot more professional experience with that as well. Let me keep scrolling to see. I think I've gotten lost here in the chat. Okay, where can we find the virtual sessions by employer? So Ashley, we actually have those on the Career Services YouTube page. I can drop the link for that after. Or you let me write a note so that way I don't forget, but I will drop that on here after, and you can actually see who we've had sessions with in the past, and then we are working to have more of those in the fall as well. So just check your email and follow us along on social media. I'll plug that in a minute too, but we're at Troy U Career on most platforms, so that's where we're going to post all of our events as well. Job shadowing during the COVID age. Yeah, okay, that's going to be more challenging. I think we will start to see some innovative ways of doing that. It's just going to take companies and people a little while to figure out what that's going to look like. But I've seen so many really great and positive things come out of this quarantine that we've been in, such as these virtual coffees and just different events that we're thinking about holding, that I think it will be possible at some point, whether it might not be you can go sit there with that person. It might be that you do more of an informational interview instead of job shadowing. So it would be up to you to really craft those questions and say, hey, what do you do every day? What are some pros and cons of their career field? How did you enter into it? What advice do you have? And go ahead and make those connections now. Please don't put that off just because we're in this weird, tricky environment that we're in. Start making the connections, and hopefully we'll turn a corner at some point in the future, and then you'll be able to start doing those in-person job shadowing experiences again. We actually have a student worker in our office who had an internship over the summer. It got turned virtual, so she's been here in Troy, Alabama, but completing that virtually, and she actually got offered an extension for a whole nother year to keep doing that internship and work with them while finishing up her classes. So it's definitely still possible. It's just we're all thinking outside of the box along the way. Okay, let's see. Answering some questions. Okay, did I miss anything?
And we have a couple people that chimed in and said they hadn't seen Handshake. So
okay.
What we can do is we'll share out the links to every single virtual coffee we've done, and there at least been 2 or 3 that'll cover Handshake. But Emily, can you just describe kind of what's most important to know about Handshake for a second, if you don't mind?
Yeah, of course. And so It's kind of like, well, it's our online jobs database, but it does so much more than that. That doesn't sound as cool as it is. So you can schedule appointments to meet with us virtually if that's what you would like to do, to kind of talk through some of your options. And then you need to fill out your profile, and it'll walk you through that when you first log in. Tell it what your major is, what areas you would like to live in, what careers you're interested in, and then it will start showing you active job postings from employers who say they want to recruit and work with Troy University students. So it's not just local to Troy, Alabama, because we know a lot of our students aren't here in Troy, Alabama. So it's really, I would say, probably heavy in the southeastern region, but it does expand nationwide, and then a couple overseas opportunities as well. So obviously those are going to change as jobs come and go, but we still have job postings being posted daily. So that should be a little encouraging to some of you guys who are entering job search in the world of COVID.
Perfect. Thank you, Emily. We're going to take one last question from Alan, and it is, do companies emphasize more on your ranking of school or on your personal competence?
Good question.
Both. It's kind of a tricky question. So what you'll see is employers will sometimes choose which schools they want to partner with in general. But that's what's been good about all of the virtual things that have been happening, is those barriers have been taken down, because now we're all learning online. We're all at home together. We're becoming more equal in that regard. And so sometimes that could matter, but I would say you could outwork someone just based on their school, based on what you have in your cover letter and your resume. It's thinking about those experiences that you have and the connections that you're making, on top of, are you trying to network within that company? So that way they're familiar with your name and you kind of have a friend on the inside helping you out.
Excellent. Thank
Warren
you.
also mentioned, I forgot, Handshake will have a list of all of the, for our virtual career fair, and all of the employers attending. So thank you for reminding me of that.
Very good. And I see Kelsey has one. She's trying to sneak in one last question. Good, Kelsey. And that will be it before we thank everybody. So Kelsey's asking, do the virtual career fairs include any overseas opportunities?
So I can't answer that yet, because we're still in the process of launching that out. So that should be at the end of the month, and then employers will start to sign up. So I can't say yes or no, but Handshake would have some of those opportunities in general, where employers may not choose to attend the virtual fair, but their job postings are listed.
Thank you, Emily. So I would like to, we're almost at our closing time now. I would like to take a moment and thank Emily, because she is amazing, right, everybody? If you could go ahead and clap in the chat box or unmute and clap.
Thank you.
You just shine. So thank you so much for being one of our heroes at Troy Career Services. And I do want to take a moment to thank our partners at Troy Career Services for jointly sponsoring this virtual coffee with the College of Arts and Science. I want to thank everybody who came today, especially our students. And this is part of the virtual coffee series that we started as part of COVID-19 to just check in with our students and make sure that everybody's okay. So to honor that tradition, even though we're going to close out the recording in a moment, folks are free to either exit by clicking the X on the top right, or they're free to stay if they have a concern they want to talk to us about. We'll stick around as long as you need us. But most importantly, thank you, Emily. That was really, I always learn everything every time I talk to you. So I really appreciate it. And I have a feeling everybody here learned something today too. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
We're going to stop the recording now. Feel free to stick around if you'd like.